Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the DCAU Retrospective. A little while back I reviewed the first volume of Batman the Animated Series, but even after that I was left eager to see more adventures from the Dark Knight, so here we are reviewing Volume 2 of Batman the Animated Series. I should remind that the reason I said Volume 2 as opposed to Season 2 is because the volume sets are in order of production and not air dates. The first two volumes make up the first 56 episodes of Batman the Animated Series, which when it comes to air dates makes up the first season. Seeing as episodes from Volume 2 aired in the same time frame as episodes from Volume 1, since like I said last time, holiday-specific episodes like Christmas with the Joker aired at the time of the holiday season, and an episode like The Cat and the Claw aired first when in production order On Leather Wings was the first episode. Air date-wise, Season 2 is The Adventures of Batman and Robin, which was Volume 3, and the new Batman Adventures was aired 2 years after the end of Batman the Animated Series Volume 3, and that is Volume 4. But for convenience sake, I'm just going to say Season 2 for the remainder of the video. So now that distinction's been made, let's get into this review. I don't have too much to say in regards to introductions, since as just established, the show went through minor changes in the next volume, but major changes in the fourth. But since Volume 2 is technically the same season as Volume 1, it's pretty consistent with what we've seen already. So let's just jump into the first episode, Eternal Youth. The plot's pretty simple. Many entrepreneurs are being invited to the Eternal Youth Spa, where I guess they'll feel young again. I don't know. However, right away, despite the attempts to hide it, it's clear that it's a plot by Poison Ivy, and the businessmen and women are people who paved over forests for their corporate gain, so the spa is just really a trap. Bruce Wayne gets an invitation to go, but obviously, since crime doesn't take a vacation, neither does the Batman, so he declines but tells Alfred that he and his friend Maggie Page could go in his place. I'm not sure why Ivy was after Bruce, seeing as he was in opposition to anything harmful happening to the environment thanks to his company.
I won't have Wayne Enterprises involved in an operation that destroys a rainforest. Shut it down or you're gone.
But I guess he's the figurehead of Wayne Enterprises, so therefore is to blame. Anyway, Alfred and Maggie have a lovely time at the spa, and after Alfred comes back with a newfound love of plants, he and Maggie return to the spa, but then they're trapped by Poison Ivy, revealing that she had been turning all these executives into trees with her new chemical that she whipped up, showing that despite being criminally insane, she's actually pretty intelligent. At the same time, Batman discovers that a missing businesswoman had gotten an invitation to the spa, and that's when he decides to check it out, obviously finding Ivy and all the victims, and so then he puts a stop to her plans, destroys the chemicals, and sends Ivy off to jail, all the while finding out how to save the people who were transformed into trees. So after writing about it, this episode is alright. I mean, the basic plot is again rather simple and predictable, but I do find it more enjoyable than Pretty Poison from the last season, and most importantly, as the first episode, I find it infinitely more enjoyable than On Leather Wings, which was the first episode from the last season. Seeing as I think the first episode should be a trendsetter, and with that said, this episode has the better action, more enjoyable characters, and more witty humor than On Leather Wings did.
Ah, it says here you just won $10 million.
That's nice.
Another thing I really like about this episode is that Poison Ivy obviously has an agenda to preserve the beauty of Mother Nature, but she's holding people against their will and mutating their bodies, and the episode never uses the motive as a justification for such heinous acts. Instead, she's treated like a criminal like any other, with all sympathy thrown out the window. So this episode does its job quite well as the first episode, but it's far from one of the greats of Batman the Animated Series. By the way, for the rest of the video, if you hear me say BTAS, that is an abbreviation for Batman the Animated Series. Just figured you know before I actually say it. So the next episode, and the one I feel is the true trendsetter for Season 2, is Perchance to Dream. You may have heard of this episode before, regardless of whether or not you've seen the show. It really is one of the popular episodes, up there with the likes of Heart of Ice, Baby Doll, and Mad Love. Personally, I don't think it's one of the best, but I think it's really well done. The plot is that Batman tracks down a lead he's been following, and that takes him to a warehouse where he's knocked out, but wakes up the next day with everything all topsy-turvy. Alfred's horrified when Bruce is looking for the Batcave inside the clock, however it only gets stranger with the appearance of...
You sound upset. Is something the matter?
Bruce Wayne's parents. In addition to Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman, appearing as Bruce's fiancée, followed by Batman appearing to put crime out of commission. So far, it seems like a pretty generic Dreams episode with the perfect reality, and usually how these things go is that our hero doesn't want to leave since it's just so perfect, but something pulls them back to reality, and while yes, Bruce does begin to be content seeing as this is the perfect world for him, but as soon as he discovers the truth with the fake newspapers and the unreadable books, the story takes a different turn. But not without explaining how he knows.
And you're the one responsible. A dream? Why do you think that? I suspected it from the start. I knew I was right when I tried to read the newspaper. The print didn't make sense. Yes? That's because reading is a function of the right side of the brain, while dreams come from the left side. It's impossible to read something in a dream.
Okay then. My research on that has turned out pretty inconclusive, but still, that seems a little off. Maybe just seeing the letters make no sense and books being unreadable is fine, but why not some more subtle hints? Like, the episode doesn't even bring attention to this, but according to Alfred, Bruce proposed to Selena like a week ago and the wedding is in like a week. That makes no sense, which would have made for a good hint early on. But Bruce climbs to the top of the bell tower, and that's when the GCPD begin a manhunt for him. Batman arrives, but Bruce attacks him, leading to the reveal that the Mad Hatter is behind the dream world and that there is no way out. To prove that this is not happening, that there is a way out,
Isn't an ordinary dream. What if you're wrong?
Then I'll see you in your nightmares.
Mr. Wayne, no!
Bruce commits suicide to exit the dream. Now that is why I love Batman so much.
He can be the outcast. He can make the choice that no one else can make. The right choice.
And that's exactly true in this continuity, as we'll see numerous times. I love how despite this being the perfect reality for him, he refuses to live in it because it's simply not real. His parents are dead, Selena's Catwoman, and he's Batman. That's just how it is. A weaker character would have stayed in the dream world, but his resolve is so strong that he's not willing to submit to this while the criminals of Gotham City get to run free. A similar dilemma is presented to him in the episode of Batman Beyond called Out of the Past, where Bruce becomes young again, but he still refuses to accept that because at that point, he's old and that's how it is. But we'll talk about that way later down the line. From this point on, the season continues the same formula from the last, generally disconnected plots that may set up a new character or make references to past events every now and again, but on the whole, the series is still fairly episodic as opposed to the later works from this team like STAS or Justice League. For example, you don't need to see the Cape and Cowl conspiracy to understand the strange secret of Bruce Wayne. In the last review, I'd run through many of the core characters and the noteworthy episodes to come with them, and obviously I'm not going to describe these characters again, so for more context, watch my review of the first volume of BTAS. Now anyway, let us continue. The next episode I want to bring attention to would be the very first two-parter, Robin's Reckoning, which of course focuses on Dick Grayson, aka Robin, whom you might recall made 2 appearances in the last season, and no, Dreams in Darkness does not count since that was just a hallucination. Robin is a college kid, so now that he's back he can help Bruce again, but after an interrogation they get the name of the guy they're looking for, Billy Marin. And it's then that Batman refuses to allow Robin to work on this mission, which initially just confuses him, but upon digging up on the name, Robin finds out that this is an alias for Tony Zuko, which triggers a flashback that takes up most of the episode. If you're unfamiliar with how this goes, well then basically Robin was a circus performer alongside his parents, the Flying Graysons, and when they won't do business with a scam artist, he infiltrates the show and cuts some of the strings on the wire they were going to use to perform, thus causing their deaths, and Bruce Wayne taking him in. And of course, this being a kids show, technically they can't show anything pertaining to their deaths, but the imagery where we see this, I feel as if it tells the story perfectly without showing the fall. I don't know, something about this just gets me every time. It's just really eerie looking. Like, imagine being the crowd seeing this live. It would be horrific. Thus ending part 1 with Robin going against Batman for the very first time, thus planting the seeds for the eventual fallout between these two to come in a few seasons.
Oh no, he's not gonna ace me out.
Please, Master Dick, you must do as he says.
Not this time, Alfred. Maybe not ever again.
Part 2 continues the flashback from the first part, showing us more of Grayson's first night as the adopted son of Bruce Wayne, with a few key points worth highlighting. First being their growing bond as they connect over the homicides of both their parents. 2, the fact that Dick had snuck away to try and find Zuko himself and take revenge, and it's there that he almost lost his life if Batman hadn't been there. Also, there's a scene where Dick rescues a woman from being attacked, which shows he has a selfless attitude and wants to help people with or without the eventual influence from Batman, making him eventually adopting the Nightwing role make all the more sense. Thirdly, for canon's sake, I want to point out that we see in the flashback that at one point Batman clearly has a change of costumes, which happens a lot of times in this continuity. Although whether or not half of them are canon or just an art style change is up in the air, seeing as this first bat suit that we see here and in another flashback in an episode called The Mechanic has a different bat emblem and a different utility belt. It kind of reminds me of the design Batman will use in the new Batman Adventures era. Then in Justice League, he again has a suit resembling his initial one, only with longer ears, with the suit from the new Batman Adventures clearly being shown in a display case in the episodes A Better World and Starcrossed. Anyway, I'm going on an incredible tangent. Lastly, since this is a younger Batman, we do see some of the more brutal tactics, like attacking the driver of a moving vehicle, in addition to breaking bones in an alleyway. I like the fact that he uses disguises to blend in with the criminals and get information from them, which is straight out of the comic books. Although this is not the first time we see this happen, as the same thing did happen in an episode from the first season I didn't bring up called The Forgotten. The disguise being how we got in the predicament of that episode to begin with. I didn't mention it given how the episode is pretty forgettable. Despite the bad joke, I'm actually serious. That episode really wasn't anything special. However, this episode ends on the story from the present, and what happens there is that Batman gets injured from a gunshot and has to rely solely on his stealth abilities to deal with the remaining guards, but that is until Robin arrives on the scene and delivers the final blow to Zuko, ending the episode on a pretty optimistic note for these characters.
You were right, you know. Not bringing me along. You knew I'd take it too personally.
It wasn't that, Robin. It wasn't that at all. Zuko's taken so much, caused you so much pain. I couldn't stand the thought that he might take you, too.
Come on, partner. It's been a long night.
Season 2 is another two-part story arc. Despite not having part 1 and part 2 in the name, the episodes in question being Night of the Ninja and Day of the Samurai. In the last video, I said that we would see Bruce's training in episodes from this season, and here we are. Several Wayne Enterprises subsidiaries are being robbed with a throwing star left at the scene. This triggers another flashback where Bruce remembers when he was learning all of his techniques but was continuously bested by another student by the name of Kyodai Ken. Showing Batman being defeated is a great idea, seeing as now we can clearly see what the experiences were that led to him being the man he is today, as opposed to implying that he's been nearly flawless ever since day one. That would just be a poorly written character. So as I said, showing flaws in his personality is always good. Even to this day, he still isn't perfect, since nobody is. Robin's Reckoning being a good example of this. As opposed to just telling Robin how he feels, he shuts Robin out and says, "I make the rules," and turns the communicator off. He's shown making mistakes in the new Batman Adventures, Justice League, and even down to Old Age and Batman Beyond, which just makes him more human in my eyes, which is always a plus, seeing as that's exactly what Batman is. Which brings us to Batman's first encounter with the mysterious ninja, who is obviously Kyodai Ken, but anyway. Batman appears out of the shadows, and when I say that, I literally mean he pops in out of thin air. Yeah, this season I noticed a lot of animation mistakes and poor looking moments, but I'll get to all the ones I noticed throughout the video. The explanation coming when we get to Joker's Wild. Batman's almost killed before Robin saves him in the nick of time, which I swear sounds like something I saw before in a previous episode. But that's neither here nor there. He also isn't letting Robin join on this one, and he does anyway, which also sounds familiar. But hey, that does lead to a pretty good scene between Dick and Alfred.
I think Bruce is worried he can't take this ninja. He won't admit it, of course.
He never admits fears, Master Dick. Haven't you learned that by now? Ah, Master Bruce.
I'll be at the museum.
The next flashback is triggered by the sight of a sword that resembles one that Kyodai Ken tried to steal from both the Master of Ken himself and Bruce, which is what got him banished in the first place and why he wants revenge against Bruce Wayne. Vengeance that he takes when Bruce and the reporter, Summer Gleason, get in the car, and then that's when he takes them both hostage. To which he beats the shit out of Bruce, and he doesn't fight back because he doesn't want Summer to even see Bruce do moves that would make him look like Batman. Luckily, Robin arrives on the scene to provide Batman enough cover to be able to fight Kyodai, resulting in Batman conquering his fears and absolutely destroying Kyodai. Before the end, however, Kyodai flees like the coward he is, and in the episode his whereabouts unknown, thus leading to the episode much later in the season, Day of the Samurai. This episode begins in the dojo of Bruce's sensei, Yoro, as a young student Kyari is training up until she's captured by Kyodai Ken, whom wants revenge. So wait, he wants revenge for the time he failed to get revenge for the one time he was disgraced. But anyway, he orders Yoru to deliver him the map that leads to a centuries-old scroll instructing the reader on how to perform some fatal blows during battle. But Batman arrives in Japan to help, which includes delivering the map, and he of course follows Kyodai as well as rescuing Kyari, but the cost being that the scroll is mostly gone, with Kyodai having the most legible part, that being the deadliest move, the Death Touch. Kyodai manages to kidnap Alfred as well, and as a result, Bruce and Kyodai must have one last battle on the side of a volcano, both without their masks. The Death Touch gets used on him, but he rises above that and delivers the final blow, with Kyodai disappearing after a bow of respect, never to be seen again. Alfred wonders why he survived, and that was because, well, he came prepared, obviously. Thus ending the episode. After writing the paragraph, I realized I didn't have much to say about this one, especially in comparison to Night of the Ninja, seeing as this episode, upon watching it, I thought I enjoyed it more. But while it looks great and feels very climactic, I don't think it adds much to the story that Night of the Ninja gave us, seeing as Bruce had overcame one of his greatest fears and Kyodai fled like a coward, very fitting for his completely unlikable character. I enjoyed this episode, but on the whole, it's not one of the best of this season. The only other two-parter of this season would be Heart of Steel, which is probably the weakest set of episodes this entire season. Why do I think that? I was nodding off at the whole thing. The plot is that a mysterious woman leaves a suitcase at Wayne Enterprises, and the suitcase is a robot that steals some stuff belonging to the company. The investigation reveals that only one company, Cybertron Industries, could be responsible. Also, these episodes introduce us to Barbara Gordon, the commissioner's daughter, who is a college student currently, and I will add that this is a full season before her first becoming Batgirl, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Anyway, to give the Cliff Notes version, a giant-ass AI is in control, and there are now robots capturing and replacing people such as the mayor, Bullock, and Gordon, and the robot attempts to take Bruce as well, but obviously he escapes, leading to a climax where the hostages are rescued and the AI is destroyed, and that's about it. Again, not an episode too much to say. Carl Rosem, as the maker of the AI, is a character I really don't care about. The mystery is revealed right before it even begins, with a fake Gordon obviously attacking the real one, with Barbara coming off like a complete idiot for not seeing through this robot stuff. And the animation is nothing special, and neither's the action, as well as some weird bits like Bruce's scream here. Like I said already, this is the weakest episode of the season. However, it is better than the worst episodes last time, those being I've Got Batman in My Basement, as well as Prophecy of Doom, which shows the fact that they are improving, since Heart of Steel is not a bad episode, just bland, whereas the episodes I just listed were pretty bad episodes. But in these videos, I don't want to spend too much time on negative aspects, seeing as this is a retrospective about a series I really enjoy. And if we're talking about things I enjoy, then the Joker episodes for Season 2 are definitely high up there. Not as many episodes are exclusively focused on him though, biggest appearances being the Laughing Fish and Joker's Wild, but instead he makes large cameos in a lot of other episodes such as The Strange Secret of Bruce Wayne and Harley and Ivy. Starting with the Laughing Fish, right out of the gate, the episode just screams Joker. Not from the title, I just mean from the setup. Basically a shipment of fish arrives and they're covered with the smiles of the Joker, because he's given them Joker toxin and he wants profit for each fish sold. But when the man at the copyright office won't budge, he begins his next scheme for revenge, with Mark Hamill's now perfected Joker voice only making it even better than the classic episodes like Christmas with the Joker and The Last Laugh. Although I'm going to say that there is one flaw I have with this episode, and that would be the part where Francis, the copyright guy, is under police supervision and the Joker launches his attack, and Jesus Christ, this show is known for the high quality animation, but damn, this shot looks fucking atrocious. I had to rewind at least 3 or 4 times because it was so bad. Seriously, what the hell? The room is like moving around and the camera gets closer to him and then the people are moving in slow motion while the thing's going full speed? I'm actually serious when I say that's my main flaw with an otherwise amazing episode. We've got a fun storyline, good action, great lighting and shadows, excellent voice acting coming from all the characters, which includes Gordon and Bullock, whom we get significant screen time with as he tries to be an actual police officer and stop the Joker instead of just leaving it to Batman. We even have a Joker, not death in the ending. You know, you can't have a Joker episode without that.
See, Batsy, I think of everything.
However, my favorite Joker episode this season is Joker's Wild, no doubt. Beginning with showing us the rivalry between the Joker and Poison Ivy, which leads to the reveal that a businessman by the name of Cameron Kaiser has opened up a new casino, seemingly mocking the Joker.
He's ripping me off. I'll protest. Yeah, I'll sue. Then I'll rip his lungs out. And I will, too.
One breakout later, and the Joker is out for revenge, but where there's a clown, there's a bat. A brief investigation reveals to Batman that Kaiser initially was doing a medieval-themed casino, but he has completely used up all his money and is up to his ears in debt. So his plan is to have the Joker blow up the casino so he can collect the insurance money, but before he can deal with that though, the Joker starts causing commotion in the crowd, and even as Bruce Wayne, Batman still manages to give the Joker a hard time.
Don't care for the decor?
Not hardly. All those horrible faces grinning at me. That would do things to my mind after a while.
Who says you have one?
Yeah, I'd be ready for the Laughing Academy if I had to stare at that ugly clown all day.
Why, I oughta.
Hit me.
Long story short, Batman tells Joker about Kaiser's plan, but before he even thinks about it, he tries to kill Batman in an over-the-top scheme. And here we see how Batman stores his grapple gun, and I'm not sure this makes a lick of sense. The centerpiece comes out and that's where it is, but if the belt is as thin as Be a Clown suggests, where the hell is there room for this thing? Whatever, it's only a minor nitpick. The episode's climax is a fight between Batman and the Joker inside of a helicopter, and of course, he doesn't win and goes back to Arkham with the other villains mocking his defeat.
And so it ended for both ex-billionaire Cameron Kaiser and the Joker.
Bah! Enough of this rubbish.
Hey!
We were watching that!
And was returned to Arkham.
You bunch of no-good, whacked-out losers. You make me sick.
Although something worth mentioning here is that this show has several animation studios from all across the world working on it, and this is one of the episodes done by ACOM Productions, and Bruce Timm and others had no problem saying how bad they were at their jobs, which negatively affects the presentation. I noticed a lot of mistakes in the animation this season, and it's interesting to note how some of the episodes I found mistakes in were done by ACOM Productions. Like, look at this part where the Joker steals this car. It's supposed to say, win the original Joker mobile, but in the final product it says, won the Soriginal Joker in a style. I mean, they aren't entirely to blame, seeing as the DCAU guys are still making mistakes all the way up to Justice League Unlimited, so they aren't perfect either. We have a quote from Dick Sebast to summarize it.
Each director on the show, after pouring his heart and soul into an episode, would wait with bated breath to see if it would be assigned to ACOM, the kiss of death.
The next episode I want to mention isn't really a Joker episode, but still, he and Harley are absolutely the best part. The episode in question being The Man Who Killed Batman. Another one of the best episodes of the season. A complete loser by the name of Sidney is talking to Rupert Thorne about how he needs to get away out of Gotham, and the reasons told via flashback. He wanted to make it big in the criminal underworld, but of course he's a complete loser, but thanks to this he accidentally killed Batman. So now he's known as the strongest man in Gotham for having done Batman in. Which leads to his happiness for about 5 seconds.
Suddenly I'm thinking, if I take down the guy who took down Batman, then I'll be the toughest guy in town.
Hey, you got my vote, Chief. Come on, Squid, give him what for.
The fight in the bar causes the whole place to be locked up, but luckily for Sidney, now dubbed Sid the Squid, he's bailed out of jail.
Welcome, Sidney.
By the Joker. And now he has to be an accomplice in a jewel heist to prove Batman's death. I love the atmosphere in the Joker's hideout. The lighting is great and the atmosphere here just feels really unsettling since you could just be offed any second by the Joker. Like this guy.
And one more thing, Murphy. Don't ask stupid questions.
What? Oh! 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 Oh!
Well, he isn't actually dead, but still, that's totally what the scene was implying. We already know thanks to Be a Clown and Return of the Joker what this incarnation is capable of, so I don't think he had any intentions of sparing this guy. Batman, of course, doesn't arrive, and this is actually our very first look at the abusive side of the Harley-Joker relationship that will be greatly expanded upon in later episodes.
Put them back, Harley.
Oh, Mr. J, you're such a kidder. You never could...
I said put them back!
This scene is disturbing, albeit funny at the same time, seeing as the Joker doesn't want to steal anything simply because Batman isn't there to stop him.
Without Batman, crime has no punchline.
But easily my favorite part of this entire episode has gotta be the part where the Joker gives this long as all hell speech at Batman's memorial.
Dear friends, today is the day the clown cried. And he cries not for the passing of one man, but for the death of a dream. The dream that he would someday taste the ultimate victory over his hated enemy. For it was the Batman who made me the happy soul I am today. How I agonized over the perfect way to thank him for that. Perhaps with a cyanide pie in the face. Or an exploding whoopee cushion playfully planted in the Batmobile. But those dreams were dashed by the Weasley little gunsel sitting there in our midst. The cowardly, insignificant Garnet who probably got lucky when Batman slipped on the slime trail this loser left behind him. This mound of diseased hyena filth who's not fit to lick the dirt from my spats! But I digress. The time for sorrow has passed. It's time to look ahead to a future filled with smiles. And I'll be smiling again, just as soon as we take that man there, and slap him in that box there, and roll it into that vat of acid there.
There's a lot to like in this scene, mainly because it's just 80 seconds straight of the Joker venting, but the atmosphere feels tense since, like I said, the Joker is prone to offing people on a second's notice, and I love the irony seeing as Joker is mourning a murder, and his way of mourning is attempted murder. But up to this point, the episode has been so enjoyable because it really is unlucky event after unlucky event that at the beginning seemed like a good thing, which makes the episode always a joy to watch. Somehow Sid survives being thrown into a vat of acid, and that brings us to the current moment.
Sure, I'll get you out of Gotham, Sydney. In a pine box.
But right at the last second, Batman arrives at the scene with a ghostly rendition of his theme.
You!
But of course, there's an animation error right in the middle of a good scene. When Batman throws Thorn, he pops out of existence. I just plainly don't get this. I mean, what caused such a thing to happen? I think an explanation is that this show was designed for tiny-ass CRTs with RF cables where no one would see this tiny shit, but now it's 2017 and 1993, and I can clearly see it in my HD TV. I will forgive it for now since we're 2 seasons into the DCAU, but when we get to Superman, Batman Beyond, and Justice League especially, there will be no excuses. Relying on limitations to cover up mistakes can save you in the 90s and early 2000s, but it's not the Blu-rays and DVDs' fault that these mistakes are there, it was the animators who did it to begin with. If they hadn't made the mistakes, then the DVDs and Blu-rays wouldn't be at fault for exposing this shit. Although with BTAS, the circumstances were a bit interesting. I think they really have been pushed to produce episodes in bulk, seeing as on weekdays there would be 1 new episode of Batman the Animated Series every single day. But let us move on for now.
Well, that was fun. Who's for Chinese?
Harley and Ivy is the last episode of the season, and shows an interaction we've yet to see, and as the title suggests, it's Harley Quinn teaming up with Poison Ivy.
What's going on, Rock? The place is a mess. No one's fed the hyenas, and I can't find my socks. Where's Harley?
You canned the bush, remember?
So, she's always come back before.
Gee, I guess you ain't seen the papers then.
Papers? What are you babbling about?
One of the biggest Batman villains of all time got a ginormous shaft in the previous season, that being the Penguin. So now he's got 2 appearances all to himself, as well as a large role in The Strange Secret of Bruce Wayne, and almost got him. I'm going to start with his second major appearance, that being the Mechanic, where we meet the man who Batman once saved that eventually made the Batmobile. Although given how the car gets destroyed in the opening, you'd think this guy would make a slimmer design, but anyway, I like seeing characters like this Mechanic, whose name is Earl, as well as Lucius Fox, who made an appearance in Heart of Steel and Feet of Clay. It's good to see characters help Batman do these kind of things and show that, again, he's not perfect and can't do absolutely everything. But I digress. This episode's fairly by the numbers. Penguin hijacks the Batmobile and takes control of it, yada yada yada. This sounds like a plot the writers of The Batman would come up with, and, well, it was. Although I only brought this episode up because I wanted to mention how the Penguin just flat out murders this guy.
You are to be rewarded, sir.
Reward?
Would $300,000 be enough?
300,000?
Oh, all right. 400,000, but that's my final offer. Don't spend it all in one place.
Excuse me? I don't get it, boss.
It's all right here. Our friend Mr. Rundle amassed newspaper reports of various instances when the Batmobile was damaged. Then he checked the dates against the other times his company got orders for these types of materials. In every case, it was a match, the same exact date.
Excuse me? Where will this take me?
On a sea cruise.
I mean, they don't show him dead, but there's no way he survived either. However, despite the cliche, this is a good episode all things considered, seeing as the stakes are fairly high with Earl's daughter having been captured by the Penguin with a knife to her throat. I was basically just saying that the Batmobile being hijacked is a bit too cliche for my tastes. But definitely a better Penguin episode than I've Got Batman in My Basement. Which is, by the way, the worst and most cringeworthy episode of the entire series, and that includes episodes from the new Batman adventures, by the way. But the real Penguin episode to focus on would have to be Birds of a Feather. Finally, the Penguin's given the spotlight in an episode entirely from his point of view as we see him try to assimilate with high society, which is where his origins were. However, he's just generally a nasty guy, but that doesn't stop this attention whore Veronica Vreeland from trying to get him at a party of hers just for the sake of having a few headlines dedicated to her. But really, they just think he's a joke. However, his act of heroism when saving Veronica shows how humane the Penguin could be, but alas, he finds out about the ruse and takes Veronica hostage and demands a ransom. Batman has to stop this, of course, but in the end, who really was the villain? I think it's those two stuck-up jerks. I mean, sure, Veronica was starting to change her mind, but it was still an awful plan. And this guy, he's just completely irredeemable. In the last video, what I said worked really well was the formula they used for the origin story of Mr. Freeze, the Scarecrow, Two-Face, and Clayface. The man in the business suit ruined me formula, where the costume villain is the one Batman has to stop, but really the businessmen are the true villains of the story. This is the same formula, however it's not an origin story, even with an ending similar to Heart of Ice.
Oswald, I really was growing fond of you. It's too bad this had to happen.
I suppose it's true what they say. Society is to blame. High society.
Also, this is the first episode to establish Batman's belief that criminals don't reform. This will be followed up in episodes like The Riddler's Revenge, Harley's Holiday, Second Chances, and this belief carries all the way into his old age in the Batman Beyond episode Meltdown, where he tells Terry to be weary of Mr. Freeze and his supposed reform. But more on those episodes later down the line. Another character who got the shaft in the previous season was Catwoman. Like I said, her debut episode was robbed halfway through by Red Claw and the Cat in the Claw, so now she's got 2 episodes of herself as well, in addition to a role in Almost Got Him. The first and best of the 2 is Cat Scratch Fever, Catwoman being released from jail and is told to never put on the costume again. And a nice touch being how Selina isn't released from Arkham, but from jail, because she's not insane like the Joker or Two-Face, she's just a thief. But when she returns home, her cat is gone missing, and this was the moment that the story became really good. Simply because the loss of a pet is a story that's very relatable to a large amount of people all across the world, so naturally anyone could feel sympathy for Catwoman in this situation. Things get more complicated since Selina finds these people rounding up animals, but in the attempt to stop them, she gets arrested. But the next scene shows Roland Daggett from Feet of Clay returning as he's hired these people to capture stray animals so that his scientists can give them a virus that will go to humans when bitten. And once the virus has been given to the animals, they're going to release the infected onto the streets. The people will beg him to make a cure, which he has already in development and completed. A plan like this is the kind of thing that makes a detestable villain, and honestly, there hasn't been a villain in a BTAS episode that I wanted to see get their comeuppance as much as these guys. Because tampering with innocent animals like this for profit is crossing the line of morality and then some. Catwoman tries to rescue her cat, but she gets infected, but before she kicks the bucket, Batman gets involved and as a result gets into a fight with those thugs rounding up animals. And they get the comeuppance I've been clamoring for. Batman gives the antidote to the animals in Selina, ending the episode with Selina's cat returning home thanks to Batman. Her next appearance is strange, though. The episode's called Tiger Tiger, and the plot is that Catwoman gets kidnapped by some gorilla dude, and the next thing we know, Catwoman's in a laboratory with the Gorilla Man, a Tiger Man, and some insane scientist. Most likely a reference to 50s sci-fi B-movies. The next thing that happens is that the scientist has Catwoman turned into a mutant like the tiger and the gorilla. At first, Batman seeks Kirk Langstrom out, seeing as he was the Man-Bat and on leather wings, but that is when he's directed to a remote island where Dr. Dorian is located. Batman is enraged by the transformation, but is told the only way to get her back is by defeating Tigress, the man-tiger I mentioned earlier. To sum up, Tigress learns about the true nature of Dorian, and then destroys the entire laboratory, but of course decides to stay on the island as Batman and Catwoman leave. As a reference to B-movies, I can't really comment since this is not material I have much knowledge about, but overall I like the isolated feeling of the island as well as the scene where Batman is being hunted by Tigress. All in all, a good episode, but definitely a strange thing to make an episode about. A similar episode is Moon of the Wolf, and this episode sucks. A half-man, half-wolf is attacking people, and it turns out that he was a famous athlete obsessed with winning, to the point where he would take some of this dude's steroids, but this turns him into a werewolf who must attack people at this guy's command, or no cure. He fights Batman, the end. That's the story. Of course, there are more details like Batman being kidnapped and forced into this fight, and that Anthony Romulus, aka the werewolf, knows Bruce, but it's still a really boring episode with a subpar action scene in addition to a supposed sympathetic villain, but if he didn't cheat and use steroids then he wouldn't be in the situation to begin with. So I'm really not rooting for him to get the antidote in the end. Definitely one of the worst episodes this season for being really basic to a stupefying degree. An unsympathetic villain who had his whole life ruined by another insufferable douche, and a climax that I guess suggests that Romulus is still out there, But who cares? He never comes back after this. The Spectacular Spider-Man in an episode very similar to this, only with a much more sympathetic victim and a villain that was actually competent to keep the victim at bay. In the BTAS episode, the scientist is a no threat and the wolf just beats him up in the end. Why didn't he just do that earlier? With that said, I think that covers this episode. When going back to the first season, one of the things that still surprises me is that in the 28 episodes, there was not a single one about one of the most well-known Batman villains, that being the Riddler. You all know his gimmick. He's a genius who loves riddles, and that leads to his undoing as Batman solves the riddles, defeating him every time. His backstory is the same as Freeze or Scarecrow. Edward Nygma works for an entertainment company and his boss, Mr. Mockridge, informs him that he's been fired since Nygma wanted to have a cut of the profit for his game that he exclusively designed, by the way, but Mockridge doesn't want to give him a cent.
You are a fool, Mockridge, to think you can get away with this. Your amoral greed is no match for an intellect like mine.
Oh yeah? Then tell me something, Eddie. If you're so smart, why aren't you rich?
So he plots revenge, and 2 years later, Mockridge is working with Bruce Wayne to sell the company to the Wayne Foundation, but a message appears outside that leaves him rushing out the door. In the meantime, Robin's now playing the computer game Riddle of the Minotaur, which is foreshadowing to the episode's climax. But anyway, Nygma, now going by the Riddler, has taken Mockridge hostage, and as a result, Batman and Robin have to go through a real gauntlet without their utility belts, but that leads to yet another animation mistake, as when the camera pans out, you can clearly see the belt still on Batman. Also, I love Lauren Lester as Robin, but man, his delivery of the line about the Hand of Fate was fucking awful.
We're going the wrong way, because here comes the Hand of Fate!
But when Mockridge is saved, it's revealed that the Riddler isn't even in Gotham City, but is on a plane ride out. So Mockridge is off the hook from the law after not giving Nygma his cut of the profit. However, what is that really worth? Now he's being hunted by the Riddler. Can you imagine what it would be like going to sleep knowing someone is out to kill you? That could ruin a life. Kinda reminds me of the ending of Justice for All, and in both cases, the person being hunted totally has it coming and it's satisfying to see them squirm. Seeing as Mockridge could have just given Nygma his cut of the profit, but he decided not to, so here you go, this is his fate. In regards to the Riddler himself, I like him in this series. His design is well done with him wearing a business suit as opposed to whatever you call this shite. Although I think nothing will ever top the Arkham series version of the Riddler, but like I said, he's well done in all aspects, like his design, the vocal performance, and the motives, although they did reuse the businessman roomie formula again, but it works. Although I do remember the Batman giving him a more tragic backstory, but I haven't seen that episode in like 7 years, so I don't really remember. Back to BTAS though, the Riddler makes another appearance in the episode What is Reality, which tapped into the VR craze of the 1990s. The Riddler wants to delete all the personal information about him from any and all databases, and to keep Batman and Robin busy, he also has a VR computer game for them to play. Problem being that Gordon gets trapped in the game, so Batman has to jump in to save his life while solving riddles along the way. What's funny is that this episode aired in November of 1992, and that was a whole 2.5 years before the Virtual Boy was released in July of 1995. And yet this VR world's all red and black. This episode kind of reminds me of Day of the Samurai, saying it doesn't really impact anything and is just kind of there, with an ending that shows the Riddler now trapped in the VR world, but thanks to later appearances made by the Riddler, this is null and void. But this episode has an animation mistake that I think is the worst offender to date. This is another episode done by the team, ACOM, and it shows. There is this part where for a few frames, Robin is entirely covered in black and white. What happened? Did nobody catch this? Or did ACOM just not give a damn? I found another quote about ACOM, this one being from Bruce Timm, and it goes as follows.
We retook that show considerably just to make it watchable. It was a mess. We had ACOM reanimate that one from scratch. That was the show that broke our back with ACOM, and we decided we weren't going to use them any longer. After we fired them, they still had a couple of shows in production, and those shows were a lot better. I guess they had never been fired from a series before.
I'm just glad they were fired and that we now have the standards to not let this kind of shit slide. Kirk Langstrom made a cameo back in Tiger, and now the Man-Bat is back in Terror in the Sky, the sequel to On Leather Wings. While I initially was planning on comparing the two, what sense would that make since this episode completely steamrolls that one? Firstly, I find the mystery as to who the Man-Bat is to be far more interesting than earlier, since now we actually know these characters. Is it Kirk? He's the most likely suspect given how it was him before, and that's what Batman believes at first. However, the problem is that the Man-Bat has a slight design change. But that could just be production, seeing as in the last season, the Scarecrow got a redesign in his second appearance. But Batman finds out that Kirk is actually not responsible for this, but by this point it's too late seeing as his wife has already left him, learning that he was at it again. But Batman suspects that creep Dr. March, but that's when we find out that the only likely candidate is Langstrom's wife, Francine, but she's already on a plane leaving Gotham, and of course she transforms into the, I guess, Woman Bat? but they never say that name in the episode. There's a fight, Batman gives the cure, and that's about it. Not sure if Man-Bat ever comes back since I haven't seen the next 2 seasons for a while, but still, this is a bit more conclusive than the first Man-Bat episode, seeing as that episode just sort of cut off at the end. But still, it's another Man-Bat episode that just sort of ends. But again, there's not much you could really say after this, seeing as Langstrom and his wife are now back together, they're gonna live happily, yada yada yada. The Clayface saga continues with Mudslide, with Matt Hagen completely falling apart now, and he has an old medical consultant as well as an old fan of his movies work on a suit to contain him while they work on a cure to stabilize his body. That is most of the episode summed up, and I really don't mind, seeing as I find Clayface kind of endearing. Not as good as what they did with him in The Batman, but still. He wanted to be the best looking actor out there, which is kind of a statement about the big budget movies and how being good looking first and foremost matters more than your actual acting skills. Yes, I do find this to be good and not the Romulus plot in Moon of the Wolf, and the reason being is that, like I said, Hagen needed to be as good looking as possible to keep a stable career, whereas Romulus is already at the top of his game to begin with. Anyway, Clayface steals the formula to fix him, and Batman stops this. I don't really know why. I mean, if he wanted to help, then he should have let the process finish. Sure, Clayface stole it, but the fact is that without it, he's as good as dead, or permanently Clay, or same difference really. Which is what happens. Unfortunately, he doesn't come back for a while, until the new Batman adventures, and he's also in Justice League, but he never tries to get help again, he just sort of goes back to his crime-filled roots, therefore taking a few points off of his sympathy. But anyway, good episode, but nothing mind-blowing in the end. Definitely a better sequel episode than Day of the Samurai and What's Reality. Once again, many of the episodes are dedicated to the non-costume Batman villains, so let's just do a quick lightning round of all these before we get to the last episode I want to talk about. The Cape and the Cowl Conspiracy is a good test of Batman's wits, seeing as he outsmarts a man whose whole life is dedicated to outsmarting people, in a situation where brute force will not be able to cut it. Although I don't like how Batman gets his ass kicked at the end. The Strange Secret of Bruce Wayne is an episode that keeps you invested with the looming threat of a newly introduced Hugo Strange knowing Batman's identity and having proof to bid off to one of Batman's villains. But they say screw it and try to kill him. And of course, the Joker is as entertaining as ever, and the Penguin and Two-Face are on top of their game as well. Although the ending is kind of contrived.
Not bad, huh? Maybe I'll shuck this crime-fighting gig and try Hollywood.
Off Balance is interesting since while the episode is pretty bland for most of the runtime, it introduces Talia al Ghul, and with it comes the introduction of Ra's al Ghul, who will become the main antagonist of the next season. Talia also learns Bruce's identity, but again, more in season 3. The episode itself doesn't bring much to the table, seeing as the villain, Count Vertigo, gets stopped in the end. Talia betrays Batman and takes the super powerful Destruction Ray, but Batman sabotaged it, so it doesn't really matter. But I still figured I should bring it up because of the introduction to Ra's. Speaking of setting things up, Zatanna is a crucial point in DCAU history. Again, the episode's fairly by the numbers, seeing as Zatanna is wrongly accused, and has to prove her innocence with the aid of Batman and so on and so forth. However, I do like the set piece with the trapdoors, seeing as this scene does have a tense atmosphere, as well as the scene on top of the plane where Batman and Zatanna have to fight goons, all the while holding on for dear life. Also, we see Bruce in flashback learning to become a master escape artist, and that flashback also takes place before his Japanese training, given his line here.
I'm leaving for Japan tomorrow.
However, what's really worth mentioning is that this is the first time another DC superhero has made an appearance in this universe, implying that other DC characters could exist, thus setting the stage for Superman to take flight in his own series set in this very continuity. Lastly, I Am the Night is one of the best episodes in my opinion, showing Batman giving respect to his parents as usual, but at the same time, Commissioner Gordon is shot by the Jazzman at a police raid, and Batman was not there to stop it despite the fact that he was supposed to be there given the fact that he was the one who tipped them off to begin with. With Gordon in the hospital, this creates a believable reason for Batman to begin to doubt himself, seeing as now he's not a silent vigilante of the night ready to strike at the hearts of criminals at a second notice, but instead...
They sell t-shirts of me. I've become a cliche, more good for the tourist trade than the streets.
This city would fall apart without you.
Maybe, maybe not. When you look too long into the abyss looks back through you. Maybe it's time for Batman to return to the night that spawned him, before anyone else gets hurt.
However, thanks to Robin, Batman's resolve is stronger than ever, and as a result he saves Gordon from assassination at the hands of the Jazzman, thus returning to the streets more confident than he ever was before. even setting a troubled kid from earlier in the episode on the path to being a pretty good citizen. I really like the exploration of Gordon as a father figure to Batman, seeing as Batman points out that Gordon is the age that his father would have been if he'd not been murdered, which puts the relationship in a light I hadn't thought of before. Also, Batman's self-doubt doesn't come after the fact, but it's built up to beforehand since the Penguin's let off the hook for his crimes, making Batman realize that his war on crime is never going to end, since he vowed to his parents that he would avenge them, not by killing the man who did them in, but by making an example for the crime-ridden city by being better than the people who he stands against. That only leaves us with one episode to go. Almost got him. Easily one of the show's most popular episodes, right alongside the likes of Heart of Ice and Perchance to Dream. But here's the best thing. This isn't a tragic episode like Mad Love. It's not a mystery like the episode of STAS called The Late Mr. Kent. It doesn't keep you on the edge of your seat in drama like the Justice League episode Starcrossed. This episode is a clip show, but not a lame-ass showing of shit you've already seen, but instead, the Joker, the Penguin, Two-Face, Killer Croc, and Poison Ivy have joined for a game of cards, and this leads to a debate on who's come the closest to killing Batman, hence the clip show. I don't intend on spoiling much of this episode, seeing as the stories themselves and the other villains' responses are the reason to watch the episode, since they aren't fighting Batman or showing any gimmicks. At the core, it's just people talking at a table, and they made it really entertaining. However, I would like to point out something that I was taken back by. Batman has said he's an equal opportunity crime fighter, and he shows that off in Poison Ivy's story.
It's midnight, darling. Time to unmask.
I'm honestly surprised they put that in, let alone got away with it. None of these plots are particularly deep or meaningful. I mean, the bad guy does something and almost kills Batman, but they lead to their own undoing in the end. However, the one with Two-Face is a terrible animation mistake. Dent takes Batman's belt, but in the struggle to get it back, oops. Also, in regards to mistakes, throughout the opening of the episode, there's this dead pixel vertically traveling across the screen. But hey, the Two-Face story at the very least explains where Batman got the giant coin from.
Anyone else want to go?
Me! There I was, holed up in this quarry. When Batman came nosing around, he was getting closer, closer.
And?
I threw a rock at him.
The face Joker's making right now makes this whole scene entirely worth it. I mean, what Croc said wasn't too funny in my eyes, but still. In the end, though, Croc is actually Batman in disguise, and they've all walked into a trap. That trap being the fact that Joker's plan is still ongoing, and Batman wanted to know what it was, since he has Catwoman captured with Harley Quinn. And just as a side note, Batman being Croc in disguise is what makes Croc's line actually pretty funny, seeing as Batman portrays him as a complete brain-dead loser. But I was surprised when I went back to Season 1 in the episode Vendetta, seeing as Croc wasn't played off as an idiot, like he is here in the seasons to come. Anywho, now that Batman knows Joker's plan, he can finally confront Harley Quinn.
Gee, Batman, what you gonna do? Kick me around and save your kitten? You've only got time for one.
And the last note of the video being that I want you guys to keep a mental record of this. This is the third time the Joker has taken over TV. This happened in Christmas with the Joker, The Laughing Fish, and now here in Almost Got Him. This won't be the last time he does such a thing in this continuity. It basically becomes a tradition by the time we get to Justice League. But anyway, one flirtatious conversation later, and Batman makes his exit, ending the episode and this review.
Almost got him.
Well, folks, I'm just going to say that when going into this review, I was expecting it to be shorter than the last review, seeing as, like I said, the show went through minor changes next time and major changes on the one to follow it. But this one is pretty consistent with the last. However, here we are over 9,000 words later, and this review is significantly more in-depth than the last one, to the point where I talked about all 28 episodes in this entire season. And as a result, I think it goes without saying that this season is far better than the last one. There were a few episodes I didn't care for, but like I said, Heart of Steel, Moon of the Wolf, and some of the lesser episodes this season were all passable and definitely worth watching at least once. Since at worst, they were just boring, unlike the worst episodes from the last season that were just plain bad. And the numerous episodes I did not talk about last time were just forgettable. The animation has been much better, and despite noticing more mistakes and having plenty of ACOM episodes to rip apart, I found this season to be much easier on the eyes with better action scenes and lip syncing. But there's one thing about BTAS that I've actually yet to discuss: the soundtrack. The late Shirley Walker, who passed away shortly after Justice League Unlimited ended in 2006, composed a majority of BTAS, STAS, TNBA, and Batman Beyond. Early on, when the show didn't have much of an identity of its own, was merely in the shadow of Batman 89, it used many of its themes, However, later on, every character got a theme of their own, and it makes all these moments even better, with the way they use it in these episodes being just perfect, adding to the atmosphere. Like in The Last Laugh, when Batman begins to chase the Joker, in the climax, you get a very triumphant feeling. All around, a really well done score for every episode.
Let's go, me!
But a little luck wouldn't hurt. For you, Harvey.
So now that we're coming to the end of this review, if you're interested in giving these shows a chance, now's a good time, since it seems that the DVDs of BTAS and STAS have just been reprinted and are now cheaper than ever on Amazon. Like $15 a season, each with over 20 episodes? That's real value right there. With that said, the next review will be of the first ever DCAU film, Batman Mask of the Phantasm, which got a theatrical release and just came out on Blu-ray the other day, which severely dates this video, but still. That makes me want to review it now. So I'll be tackling that next. Lastly, I would like to know from you all, what did you guys think of this review? My review of the first season was a bit out of the blue, but it didn't last very long, so people did give it a chance. Unexpectedly, this became a very long review, and so if you gave this entire review a shot, I would definitely like to hear your thoughts on it. Sonic Advance 3 will come out after Mask of the Phantasm, but before closing, I would love to give a shout out to the members who write for the DCAU Wiki. These are the guys who know way more about this continuity than I ever could, and as a result, I learned trivia that I never knew I wanted to know. Like the stuff about ACOM. I had no idea until I read the wiki, and it just made this script all the better for it. And other facts that are just a good read if you love these shows to death like I do. So this was definitely a help when trying to remember the specifics for the script. Now then, I have nothing more to add here, so thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.